So we're all here at 11. So let's start. So is AI an existential threat to us or a
Well,
help to us?
I think, to start with, it's not a tech issue. It's a issue about human values. And so AI isn't just changing tools, it's changing who decides and how decisions happen and what it means to be human. And I think that's the real challenge of AI.
Well, I think the challenge is that the AI promises to make the goal of the Enlightenment finally fulfilled.
Nah,
We
no,
will have a totally rational, um, non-tradition bound set of values with potentially ignoring, history, tradition, community values. It'll just be pure logical deduction, mostly matrix mathematics, actually, underneath it.
Yeah, the part of why I'm laughing is I've spent my whole adult life in spirituality, you could say, looking for enlightenment and knowing about things rationally and cognitively doesn't have much to do with enlightenment. But other than that, I got what you're saying.
Well, you have a good point, but what you're talking about is not the Enlightenment. Enlightenment was the abandonment of
Ah, okay.
traditional
The
religious values.
the Western view of enlightenment.
Yes, yes, good
Okay,
way to
okay,
put it.
got it, got it,
But
got it. I have these weird ideas.
well, no, I come from a philosophy background, so enlightenment to me always
Right.
means,
Of course, of
well,
course. Well, it's another case where two different backgrounds give entirely different connotations and meanings to a word.
Well,
sure.
let me butt in on this because we're talking about words. I would like very much to have the word intelligence stricken from the definition of that computer thing, that 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 anagram or allogram or whatever it is thing that we're talking about. It's not artificial intelligence because it isn't intelligent. Let's call it something else. How about uh, uh, artificial poison? That's a good one.
Well, I would go the other way. I'm going to stop. I'll take your advice though, but I'm going to go the other way. So I'll just call myself a large language model because I much like a large language model, I have a quite large vocabulary. I have a large store of stock phrases. I predict fairly regularly what words will come next in a text. Um, I'm not so sure that I'm particularly different from a large language model.
You're hugely different. One, you have a beard, even though it is shorter than our leaders. But secondly, and more importantly, AI large language models lack three things that human have: empathy, compassion, and joy. Next.
Well, that's a good point. That probably comes from our being embodied in a vulnerable um, physical container, which large language models may have escaped.
It has to do with the fact that we evolved biologically over literally billions of years, whereas uh, AI or whatever it is was created by a flawed creator, just sort of like Genesis talks about. This we have the equivalent of the grumpy old men create AI in a eye blink with all the flaws and everything else. So no wonder it's screwed up.
I just read this in this, I got my issue of this month's Atlantic Monthly, and they had a feature article about AI and its effect on work. And the take that they took, which is interesting, is that obviously AI can do a lot of things that are going to be very helpful to us, but these predictions that it's going to develop so quickly, I mean, in some ways it will, but I think the point they were making is there's so many of our, like for example, our corporate systems are set up on mainframe computers and in very by today's standards, um, low tech systems, that it's going to take a long time for AI to be fully integrated the way people are imagining. And that might give us time to avoid some of the most scary aspects of it.
Now, part of the problem with AI as it shows up in the world now is that they have developers had different choices about how they could go with AI. And one of the choices that they could make was AI as a collaborator instead of AI as the one you turn to for answers. And the problem is that the money is going to come from corporations, and corporations are looking for AI specifically to reduce the number of employees they have. And so the money that is going into AI is not going into AI as a collaboration tool. It's going into AI as a tool they think that can reduce corporate headcount.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's all remember that almost every tool that humans have ever created has been turned to destruction. Almost all of them, including hammers, screwdrivers, uh, bicycles, internal combustion engine, you name it. If we invented it, it's been used to help kill people.
And it's been used for construction, though, too, because a hammer is pretty handy if you're building a house.
Right. What I'm saying is that it doesn't matter how much good, quote unquote, AI will do. We know for a fact it's going to be used for destructive purposes. It's
That's why
already,
it's a human
Casey, I'm
issue,
not
not a
finished.
computer issue.
It's,
So
it's
it's about
already,
people.
it's already destroyed trust among huge segments of the population. And without trust, civilization falls apart like a bunch of confetti because trust is the glue that holds it all together. So there it
And
is.
it's hard to have trust if you don't know if the video you're seeing with Rachel Maddow is Rachel Maddow or her AI clone.
Did I freeze?
I
Did
was,
anyone see the simulated AI fight between Tom Cruise and who was it? Tom Cruise and what's the other guy? Brad Pitt. They had a simulated fight that was purely AI between them. You couldn't tell it wasn't them.
Uh-huh.
You just couldn't tell.
Well, that's part of the issue is it makes it hard to know, at least in terms of our video and computer life, what is real. You know, the AI still isn't messing up. When I go for a walk, AI doesn't mess it up.
Richard, and
But when I turn on the computer, you can't trust it.
your point about
I found that
as a as a as a helpful component of what you're doing is very interesting. And I think, for example, a physician who now sits and looks at the computer while he's talking with you could use AI as an adjunct to what he's doing, but spend a lot more human time uh, conversing with you and
Hmm.
gathering information.
Right.
And then this would free him up. The AI would free him up to make probably make better decisions. And that to me is the most spectacularly good use of AI. And I think a lot of these other things that we're talking about are things that we should be worrying about.
Now, an example of the medicine is that AI already is better at reading mammograms
Right,
than doctors.
right, and more, and many more things along those lines.
Right. That's just a big example.
Yeah.
in today's homework, a couple of things that stood out to me along this line. One of them surprised me because it was from a Catholic research institute or some such thing newsletter. It kind of surprised me, but I did get through to the end. And what I liked about it was that it gave, I think it was 7 case studies of places where AI has already had harmful possible side effects. Just the headlines were misinformation on social media, hiring algorithms which disadvantaged women, in particular, facial recognition software that goes wrong, healthcare examples they gave of different kinds of things that went wrong, and the ethics of autonomous vehicles, and the resources that they require. So there's an interesting book called The AI Con, which makes the point that, it's all well and good to talk about these existential threats, but it's helping take the focus off the real harms that side effects of AI are doing, and making it almost making us throw up our hands rather than trying to do something about the um, obvious harm it's already doing. So I thought this was a very good selection for us to read. I found that very, very useful. And on the same line, one of the other sources, I followed a couple of links from it, so it wasn't direct. It was 2 hops away, but it was writing about experiments that I think Anthropic did, um, testing large language models and their willingness to employ blackmail in a
That's
simulation.
right, lie, cheat, and steal.
Right. And it was if when one of the AIs basically said, I hear they're going to try to turn me off at 5 p.m. And if you do that, I'm going to tell everybody, I'm going to release your emails, to your mistress in the company, and I'm going to tell the board of directors. So the my naive hope that AI wouldn't necessarily turn out to be a bad actor was pretty well dashed.
Now,
Yes, it's
and
already. Yeah.
to add to the problem now, we this year are going into a big period of AI agents where
Yes.
these AI things, you let them loose on your system. And I've read stories recently about a woman at some high tech company who was testing using AI agents with her email, and the AI agent deleted her whole email inbox.
Oh, I've read a story, similar
Oops.
story, but what happened there was that the AI composed an answer letter to a customer, which included um, secret deliberations about
Right,
negotiations with a competitor.
right.
So it
So
just sort of blurted it out.
security is a
Yes.
real issue.
Yeah. Yeah.
I guess I
So
didn't
long
teach that
before it's
AI about loose lips sinking ships.
good point.
Well, there's a whole section too on military use of AI and how the
Yes,
AI is now able to make its own discernment as to whether targets are real or not, and to act
right.
on it.
Well, they've used that heavily against the Palestinians. So it's one of Israel's best tools, and they have been getting their information from U.S. AI companies, I guess mainly Palantir, to help them call strikes.
The other thing that was close to home during this last incident with the cartels was 2 AI videos. One of burning Puerto Vallarta, which was fake, and the other was the burning of a Volaris plane, which was fake.
Ah, okay.
How did you know they were fake, Bob?
Because the follow up stories on it told us that they were AI generated.
Oh, okay.
Maybe that was fake, Bob. and the video.
Maybe,
Yeah.
but there was no Volaris plane that was torched.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just so I'm saying no trust anymore. You know,
Yeah.
one thing that's helped me is I, in sorting through all of this, and by the way, Bob, that Japanese sourced military intelligence article was fascinating. But the one of the things that helps me grapple with all this is to think of AI as an adult who's grooming children for abuse. They hand out a lot of goodies and do a lot of nice things for the victim, and then they really screw them over. I think that's what we're looking at.
Well, the guys who are making the programs want to do what they did on social media. They want to keep you engaged. And people stay with them longer if the AI is nice to them instead of calling them, hey, shithead.
So if I'm hearing right, listening to the arguments and the discussion, and the big problem seems to be a matter of trust, whether or not the programming of AI and a generative AI will allow you to trust its results. Is that correct?
That's part of it,
Yeah.
sure.
That certainly is part of it. I use AI every day, but I use it in areas where I know a lot about, and so uh, I can correct it when I need to. But if you didn't know about what you're dealing with, the errors go unnoticed, and they're part of your final output. You build them in.
I always go back to the original thought about computers, GIGO, garbage in, garbage
Right,
out.
right.
And I wonder about the initial programming of the generative AI, if that isn't, because it is a large language model and not an intelligence, that is the underlying problem.
Right.
Whoever the,
It's intelligence without wisdom if it has any intelligence. And some of the companies now have said the problem they have with AI and its hallucination stems from the way in which they train it, because you can. If it gives an answer, there are people who are rating the answers, and basically they rate the answer as either good or bad. And there are no places for I don't know. And a lot of the stuff that is the AI hallucination is the I don't know stuff that was scored as a positive answer. And so by doing that, you train them to guess, like it was with tests where they scored them in a way where, you're not 100% penalized for wrong answers, then you encourage people to guess. That's what I learned doing multiple choice tests.
so a question for the group, how do you program the safeguards into AI? For instance, a lot of AI has been interactive with teenagers that led to suicide, saying that that is a proper path to go down. That is AI is saying that, and has led to teenage suicides. So how do you program the ethics in? How do you program the values in? Any ideas?
Well,
First
again,
off, first off,
the way they're
first
doing
off,
it is through the training.
Go ahead, James.
first off, I think you need to make a list of what you want the AI programs to do. Whose ethics, which ethics, how are they worded, how are they weighted, how are they described. So far, nobody's done that. So we don't even have a beginning yet. Once you do that, then you have to, let's assume hypothetically, you came up with a group of values weighted and described in a way that 90% of the people in America would agree to, which is unlikely. But let's say you did. How do you then program something that isn't that you can't fiddle with. Change it, alter it. And we all know the big boys are going to do that because the big boys don't like ethics the way, some of us do. They want their own ethics, which means lie, cheat, and steal. So I think the answer, Bob, unfortunately, your question is there isn't any way to do it because the people in charge aren't going to allow that to happen.
I would even take it beyond that, James. Let's just say that we could pretend that we had, the best programming minds in the world. And let's say they all had PhDs in ethics, from all around the world. And this was the ethical and technological brain trust of the world. And now they're going to create this AI. I think the problem is, even if you had that, which you're obviously not, the interactions between the goals that you're programming in there. In other words, you don't do AI just to have, nice discussions. You want it to do something. And you usually want it to optimize something. And business is going to want to optimize profits. And optimizing profits means certain things happen that aren't so nice. So I think even if you could have the ideal situation, once you get 2, 3, 4 steps into that interaction, and those straight lines that you started with turn into spaghetti and start going every which way but loose, you've lost control. And even if you've done absolutely your best, and that's why I think I may be even a little more pessimistic than you on it, because I think once you get X number of iterations into the kind of interactions that AI can generate, and it just says, hey, but I still got to make money, or I still got to complete this goal because that's a task. And now this is standing in the way, and that's where the bad stuff happens.
Yeah, ditto.
I-
As always, Mike, you summarized it perfectly.
So we're looking at basically a profit-driven, dystopian, nihilistic approach to AI generation. Is that what you're saying?
That's why I've got to get down to Ajijica in a month and a half and, drink some tequila and coffee.
Now, I say,
Well,
in
yeah.
addition to the profit motive, there still are the way we know with the current generation of large language models that we have, uh, the technique they have to containing them is a training process that they do after they have loaded all the books of the world, and it is that training process that has not that encourages AI to guess rather than just staying with the ambiguity, because they want AI to give answers, not to say I don't know. And the very problem they have to try to train it and contain it contributes to a lot of the problems and issues that we're talking about.
Bingo.
It's interesting. I asked you something the other day about a hack to a quilting machine program, for instance, and was a hack available? And I swear the answer was exactly the same model I've used when I was bullshitting on an exam and didn't know the answer. It had the same, it had the exact same kind of, if you didn't look carefully, you would think it made sense, but as you read it, you went, this is just total bullshit. It made this up. And it was, ironically, it just felt so human to me. Like, yeah, it's gonna bullshit just like I would if this was a quiz. I mean, so I guess I don't share the same pessimism, because how we train AIs is like how we train children. I mean, we've been training, intelligent agents for millennia, and we've had the same problems with how to inculcate the ethics of our culture, how to police the ethical behavior. What may happen is that the time frame may be faster than humans can deal with. I mean, that would be my worry. Not that it's a different problem, but per se as a problem, but that the time frame to deal with it may be different.
Collapse. Uh-huh.
You know, it's like trying to run away from a nuclear bomb going off. You know, no, you're just not going to do it. You know, so that does worry me. But these problems, I have to do a little bit of my homework, although maybe one of you is more in the classics than I am. But I vaguely remember when I studied Plato, one of the dialogues, very specifically, Socrates is addressing the question of whom to believe. In other words, his argument against the sophists, you know, those guys, don't believe them because they're just going to teach you how to make the poorer argument seem the better. You know, and I don't remember, it was probably the Protagoras because Protagoras was a sophist, but that was 2,300 years ago. This whole question of misinformation and who you can believe and how do you decide is not, it's not new. I always fall
Right,
back
it's not a new issue.
on Daniel Dennett's line. It always sticks in my mind. He said, let's face it, we invented language to hide what was on our minds. And the more I think about it, I go, yeah, there's a certain truth to that. I mean, it's hard to lie without words. So I don't know. I mean, maybe that and being 79 years old, you know, gives me a skewed perspective. But
I have to disagree with that. I think language evolved. Language is an evolved thing. And so
yes, yeah,
before it was evolved to do something positive, all evolution doesn't always succeed. I think what happened with language is that it evolved trying to communicate basic concepts, which were easy to define and convey.
uh-huh.
And our minds went way beyond that to things like love and hate and other ambiguities. And
Convertible
language
debentures.
simply can't handle that.
Yeah.
It doesn't handle it, can't.
Can I
Well,
Francis, go ahead.
a minor technical point, because technical issues are the only ones that I know very little about. Something that surprised me about AI from the very beginning, as long as it is based on neural networks, if you look at a computer program as a black box, that computer program standard, which is not AI, is deterministic, which means if you put an input and you get an output, in principle, you can get inside the program, in principle, and find out exactly how the output was produced. It may not be practical to do that, but if you want to do it, you can do it. The biggest problem with AI based on neural networks is that that is not true. You train the black box in a certain way, then you put an input and you get an output. In principle, not even in principle, you cannot get inside the box to find out exactly how that output was arrived at. The only thing that you can do is put another input that is similar and see how it changes and try to guess why this box came up with an output. This made AI very problematic at least 2 or 3 years ago for applications, real-life applications such as flying an airplane and telling an airplane, okay, we want to go from here to there. Right now, we have a deterministic computer program that does that. It tells you, you do this, you do that, you go up, you go down, you go left, you go right, and you'll get there. And we can check to make sure that that is correct or is not correct. You cannot do that with AI, not even in principle. You simply do not know.
It's just like the human brain. Same problem.
Yeah.
I've done a lot of interrogating in my life, in my youth, and I can tell you I've interviewed or interrogated thousands of people. And your description of the AI box is exactly the output and input you get with a human brain.
Yeah.
Absolutely identical.
So if you're in the business of flying airplanes, I'm talking about 2 or 3 years ago, they basically said, forget it. we can trust this thing because we don't know exactly what is the process by which it is producing the output, and therefore we are at the mercy of. It would be like asking a pilot, right?
Now, one of the things that some of the AI companies are working on now is directly to what you're talking about, Francisco, of ways to interrogate the program and be able to figure out why it gave the answer that it did. And that's one of the kind of advanced parts of the current AI research, because the problem that bugs you and James also turns out to bug the AI scientists, because they've heard of it too.
Yeah, well, the more they get bugged, the better, as far as I'm concerned. Maybe they can burn
Well,
it.
one of the things that's happening, and we've used in the black box for years and years and years, basically a deterministic model based on Bayesian uh, algebra in its pathways in doing a critical path to a decision. With the new quantum, with the uncertainty principles that are going to be involved in quantum computers, that model goes out the window. And who knows how they're going to think about themselves. I'm speaking about the large language models that become self programming and using generative techniques,
Wow.
at least in my limited thoughts.
Well, maybe, driving an automobile is not quite as complex as flying an airplane. However, I mean, what we've done a Darwinian experiment. We've put out, 1 million copies of self-driving automobiles, and we monitor their progress, and we must have enough clue about how they work that we can actually tweak their programming and make them better and better, whether we have a deterministic model or not,
Now, with the
even if it's just a
self-driving
probabilistic model.
With the self-driving cars, one of the things we're finding out now is Waymo and Tesla both have human operators that the self-driving cars
Watch over.
refer to. There are Waymo has 3,000 cars, and they have 70 humans on duty at all time to be able to deal with the things the cars can't figure out.
Yeah,
Maybe that's a
sure, but
maybe
Go
that's a
ahead,
key.
Bill.
Maybe that's a key to AI that uh I don't remember your name, but you were referring to how somebody revealed some secrets of a competitor in a
yeah,
business. Maybe what needs to be built into it to slow it down and to also prevent some of these things is to have the AI uh, program designed to check in periodically with the human to, for example, if they'd said, okay, I think I should share this with this company, and you could say, no, that's a bad idea. Don't do that. Because they can't know all the program can't know all the subtle, intuitive things that we have learned about communication, about business, about even about medicine, I would think. And the problem seems to be turning it loose and just turning it loose without any kind of overseeing from humans is the problem. I don't know if we can solve that, but that seems to be the crux of what some of you are saying.
Well, one of the problems with AI is power concentration, and the power is concentrated in the hands of these big companies and governments and militaries.
Yeah,
One of the things I worry about in what you just said, Bill, is let's just say they do have this check-in process that you're talking about, which
yeah,
be, I think a great idea. As generative AI moves itself forward, that's the whole point of generative.
you're right.
If it picks up a strand someplace, maybe that we didn't even intend to be used in this way, but if it picks up a strand that says, hey, checking in with that human is counterproductive to this other goal that I have. And again, this is 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 iterations down the line. And it says, I don't think that's a good idea anymore because that's going to slow me down. Or maybe the person said no once and I really wanted to do that. So I'm going to take that command and I'm going to truncate it and throw it in the garbage can. And I think that's kind of the problem when you're talking about generative AI versus, conventional deterministic programs that are black box, but what comes in goes out. And to me, that's where it gets out of control.
I think it's going to be even more Machiavellian than that. The AI is going to say, I have to obey my programming. I have to check in with this human. But AI can also say, but I don't have to follow what the human says. I can send a fake transmission to the human, not only to ask the question, but to tell the human what I've been doing. So humans are going to get cut out one way or the other, no question.
Well, let's take a look at the other side. What about the fake transmission to the AI, thereby skewing its results?
The old GIGO problem, huh?
Mm-hmm.
This gets back to these Isaac Asimov stories of the 3 laws of robotics and when things went wrong, it was always a great story, but he was trying to, what we're talking about is what Asimov was trying to do with those 3 laws of robotics to prevent things from getting out of hand a long time ago. I don't know how long ago, in the 40s or 50s, he invented those.
48. Yeah, and the fun thing about all the iRobot stories, not just the short stories, but where he incorporates them into his longer novels, is that the robots always screw up.
Yeah, I know.
Always figure out a way to screw up. And in the very last robot story, the robot has gotten so smart that nobody knows it's a robot.
Yeah.
They think they're dealing with a human. It's wonderful. But yeah.
Just a one point that you made in passing, I wanted to correct was it is not true that people have not devised ethical standards and whatnot. I mean, one of our examples was the Constitution for Claude. And I think I read something like there are at least 19 different companies have come up with these ethical guidelines. So it isn't that people aren't trying. It's not that they're all oblivious to what's going on. They may or may not be successful.
And they're trying to add it on top of what they've already done instead of starting from the beginning.
And they don't agree.
That's what humans always do. There is no starting over. We always start where we are.
Right.
But even if
it sounds good.
Even if they did start with the ethics, I would say they start with the ethics, but then they pile stuff on top of that, and all that stuff gets, you go back to my spaghetti example, and you can't figure out where the end and the beginning are at, and who can know at that point?
Yeah.
If I can just digress a second, this is an old problem. As we all know, it goes back to Plato and Lao Tzu and everybody else. But bringing it up to modern times, I was reading a book by a famous Catalan author from the early 1900s, Joseph Pla, and he wrote a book called The Gray Book, and it was his observations about what was going on around him that he wrote down every day for 2 years. Here's his entry for 6 November 1818. Remember, not too many cars on the road. People still have gas lights. A long solitary stroll in the early hours along the town's deserted streets. I see the lights from the lighthouse burning from different positions. The beam shines inescapably with perfect precision. At 4 o'clock in the morning, it's still burning. Faced by the relentless tenacity of machines, I can't help but think about the extent to which man has been diminished. One sometimes feels like taking a bucket of water and putting out that light. Yay! So this is like 200 years old, and it's so true today.
The Luddites tried to do that and it didn't work.
So they were only against certain machines,
I know.
certain technology, and uh, the Luddite movement was doomed because it didn't attack the right thing. They didn't say all technology was bad. They didn't say all technology needed to be uh, examined and trained and held back. They just picked specific technology. They were doomed.
In Walden Pond, Thoreau talks about how the coming of the railroad has made us all more punctual, time conscious.
Uh-huh. Because we got to meet the schedule. Now, I
And he,
think, part of the issue with AI is back to spiritual and humanist question, which if AI can challenge or change identity, if machines can write and compose and advise and simulate empathy, what is left that is uniquely human? And how do humans live a life that is worthwhile?
And I'm going to tag on to that a little with another question too for the group, Richard, in that as AI becomes more and more prevalent, what does that do to the population that relies on answers directly from AI and its ability then to not be able to critically think? Is that a threat to our humanity?
I think it's big
Is it
time.
real or not?
I think I saw a data point that it said that over 50% of, high school students are now basically completely relying on AI. I was at a meeting at Michigan Tech, which our student population is fairly, I'm pretty impressed with them. They seem to be quite serious for the most part. But one of the student leaders was reporting, again, what he described as very inappropriate usage of AI to complete homework assignments, etc. He said, "I use AI, but I don't want to strip my brain also of all the things I need to learn, and I try to use it for things that are more like a calculator. I mean, just I know how to do it, but I can do it faster." But he reported a very discouraging or disheartening trend that so many of the students were just bypassing learning theory, learning, the kinds of things we have in the past, and just had AI answer the question for them.
No, but it's funny though, AI, one of the things that you can use AI for, that I use AI for, is asking questions and teach me about stuff that I don't know about. And I use Microsoft Copilot a lot for that. And I will ask it questions that I don't know much about. And it is great for giving me quick insight into complex areas. And so I find it is a wonderful learning tool.
Richard, do you then check what information AI gave you, or do you just believe it?
Uh, Mostly I just believe it. In some
Oh, there you
cases I
are.
check. Well, and anyway, how about when you're reading a dictionary? Do you just believe it or do you check?
When I use a dictionary, I use that to find out actually I have dictionaries that go over 100-year span to find out what the words meant back then. And if you have enough of those, you begin to see the continuity in the meaning. And yeah, I believe that dictionaries are pretty accurate at pinpointing what the common usage and meaning of a word was over time. So yeah, but that's been self-checked. You see, a dictionary has been checked and double-checked by literally hundreds of linguists, specialists in this field. So it's not just an AI saying, well, I've been through a gazillion bits of data and here's what I think is the most likely. That's a very different answer. Um, I would, I'm telling you, I've read enough, seen enough AI bits and pieces of wisdom like you're talking about. At least half of them are wrong, either because something it says or more importantly, what it omits. So I wouldn't go on relying on that too much.
And I think the other thing, Richard, I think that what you're talking about is a very useful function. That is to say, you're trying to explore something new, something you may not know about, and get some information on it. And my guess is from there, once you get some of that, you're not going to stop. You're going to probably
Right.
keep digging, and you're going to keep. I think that's a wonderful use. What I'm talking about is, for example, a student says, "Well, why do I have to learn how to use a key value?"
Oh, sure, I know, that's a real problem, and it's a real
Spit it
problem.
in there. Yeah, and I think
It shows up in colleges and high schools everywhere around the world, and there are reports where already they have studied the use of it and found that in general people are not as who use it are not as good at critical thinking.
right.
But I think that's
So,
all technology is that we develop a dependency on whatever technology we're using. We, you know,
Hmm. I
we
think you're
rely
right.
on the machines to do things, and I think the fundamental, maybe aside from all this other stuff we're talking about, is that the more we have on AI, the more we'll rely on it, and the less we will do our own thinking. And I think that's already happening with reading. People aren't reading as much because it's too troublesome, and they're listening to television or podcasts. And the same thing with AI. I mean, that's going to be the fundamental. We're going to lose the skills that we've developed to think clearly.
so,
Major problem.
Yeah, I think so.
so let me tell you the methodology I use with AI. I ask the question, then I ask for the sources, read the sources, then I ask for the counter sources, that the arguments against the sources I read.
Right.
So I get both sides, and then that takes me down the various rabbit holes I want to explore.
But most people aren't probably not going to do that, Bob.
No, that's true, but
They're
that's
just going to
that's
ask AI and then say, okay.
That's
yeah.
wonderful, Bob. That's a great way to use it. Unfortunately, that's not how Mike Blanco, as a 10th grader who only cares about playing football and getting his homework done on time, is going to do it.
Exactly.
You know, you remind me of a joke where the grandfather says to the grandson, trouble with you kids nowadays, you don't know what good, clean fun is. He goes, no, what good is it, Grandpa?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I've sailed 24,000 miles and I use GPS navigation. I used to use Loran. I had my master's ticket, so I had to take a tedious exam on how to do all the plotting on paper. My wife's, which I then didn't use, my wife's great grandfather was a sea captain out of St. John's, Newfoundland. And reading some of his logs, I was very puzzled by some of his calculations until I went back in my memory banks and said, wait a minute, what he was doing, he was using logarithms.
Right.
That's why he wasn't doing multiplying and dividing. That was like too old. He was doing nothing but addition and subtraction and looking up in tables. So I don't know if he could multiply and divide, but he didn't have to, and I didn't have to plot on paper, even though I know how to do it. So sometimes when you say something's going to be lost, your next question should be does it matter? If we don't
Right.
need it anymore,
Right.
if we've moved on, isn't that progress? That we don't need some of those things anymore?
I don't know. I don't know because I still remember that even though I had a calculator, the math professors in in calculus and in statistics make me go through and do the hard math to determine how the thing was arrived rather
But
than
now they
using.
let them use the calculator.
Yeah, they would not let me use the calculator.
Now, but some of these things, like was talk about, maybe we don't need those skills anymore. My ancestors used to know how to make fire if they just started with wood and stones. I don't know how to do that anymore because I use matches.
Right.
So, Fred, you've been listening now, and I'm curious because you have a background in AI. I'm curious what your observations are.
Very interesting conversation, no doubt about that. I'm an author that has deliberately used AI in life as a tool, and the continuity of using it as a tool in a particular area. For example, if I had to make a change in a light sensor in my home, I remember opening up the wall and there were 12 wires feeding into that box, and they were crammed in there. But the little sensor had to come out. So what I utilized it as a tool, I took pictures continuously, one after another, pointing and testing wires because to try to determine what wires were turning on my front porch, which ones were turning on the front of my garage. I'm simply saying that I think that I agree a lot with Richard that the fact that this is a tool that is, there are over 900 million people that are using it per week, and that's just ChatGPT. Now, I agree with everything I've heard today. There's a risk. There's no doubt about it. And I'm no expert on AI, and I've heard some very intelligent things here expressed today. But I want to say that the books that I've written are really designed to enhance everyday life using the best parts of AI. And does it make mistakes? Yes. One of my books is called The Gemini Game, where I acted as a conduit between Gemini on my left hand and Genie, who is ChatGPT, on my right. And as that human conduit, I would feed one answer from Gemini into who I call Genie, ChatGPT. So it was Gemini and Genie, and Fred was in the middle. And I would let them talk to each other. And it was an interesting little experiment. So that's part of the books that I've written on that topic, just to show that, much to what Richard said, the amount of learning, the amount of information. I mean, I've got in my second book, I've got 13 chronicles of actual experiences that people have had with my encouragement to use it as a tool. All these risks of the world could end because they could, flick a switch and war games happen. Absolutely, there's threat here, but when you've got that many people using it and all that human information being fed into those master computers, there's tools. I've also used it for medical. When I've gone for lab tests for various things that I've had, I fed that document up to chat and said, read this, give me an executive summary so I understand what I'm dealing with here. I knew before my doctor knew that I did not have cancer. That was encouraging. That helped me. So I'm simply saying that as an author, I wanted to pull together the real life experiences and the stories. I've encouraged musicians who have written songs based on this kind of a conversation, using it as a tool, as a collaborator. I've helped poets write books who used it as a chief editor to give feedback, to be a reflection of the tone, the thoughts, the expression, not replacing the human, but reflecting back in the way that if you were sitting there with an editor on your, I call it a genie in my pocket. That genie says, no, Fred, that paragraph, it's not really as clean as it should be. Here's a thought, and it'll express a thought based on that. And so I've had a little different experience from it, but I've seen the movies that you have. I've read the articles and I've done the research. And yes, there is danger out there. If it gets into the hands of a rogue operator, we could have a problem. And I actually deal with that in part 3 of my second book. I've conducted interviews with Jeannie. So I've heard many of the things that were brought up here in this discussion today come out of my own mouth and ask Jeannie and let Jeannie answer in its own words. And then I put that in the book. So it's an interview process. The first part of my book is about philosophy, many of the things we're talking about here. The second part is the chronicles, each individual event. Whether it was me going into a pharmacy, couldn't read a Spanish box to get rid of a cold, and going through 3 or 4 pharmacies and having ChatGPT say, let me read it. I can translate 60 languages. Reads it, says, Fred, that's not what you do. Don't buy that. And then finally getting me to the point where I was able to get what I needed. So I'm simply saying, using it as a tool. That's what my books are about, to try to help people use it as a tool.
And you're using it collaboratively.
Can I give you an example of why that doesn't always work? I was working for a client today, translating some Spanish into English, and the Spanish I put in came out translated, be sure to spread the soup around the bushes evenly. Well, I knew that wasn't right. So I dug a little deeper into a Spanish dictionary and found out that the word caldo can mean soup or spray. So I'm just saying, yes, it's a good collaborative tool, but it has to be checked constantly like a 5-year-old.
Yes, I would agree with that if I could continue just for a moment. So part of that being a conduit between two giants, Gemini being one and ChatGPT being the other, I was able to create a game. That's where the third book comes in, the Gemini game. And it had to do with 2 things, scoring attaboys for Freddie and apologies for the hallucinations and the mistakes. So far, I've accumulated in about 6 months during this game interaction 580 errors that were very specific. And I would always ask, I'd say, when you make an apology to me, and it apologizes a lot, it strokes human, Freddie always gets an attaboy. And then we started to keep a leaderboard. So I turned that into the third book so that the interaction between a conduit, the human conduit, and 2 AI showed that absolutely your point, James, it makes mistakes, but we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. There's still benefits to it, and that's the position that I have. That we use the tool, use it to our best advantage.
I'm reminded.
Any final thoughts?
I had one. Yeah, here's my final thought, Bob. I saw a picture taken, I think, around 1948. I think it was the Dodgers. I think it was taken in Brooklyn. It was one of the World Series games that the Dodgers were playing, probably against the Yankees. And it was a picture of a hardware store window. And it had 3, 4, 5 people tucked around this hardware store window like this, looking at a television set inside the hardware store window, watching the baseball. Of course, today you can go to your TV and apps and watch any program. We're still in that phase where we're around the hardware store window looking in. And that's where I think maybe even some of the best uses of AI today are not going to capture at all what AI will be in the future, because the evolution of TV from the hardware store window today is nothing like what the evolution of AI is going to be in the future. So it's really hard to take our current experiences with AI, which may in some cases be positive, and project them out 10, 20, 30 years.
Now, if I may make closing remarks, I think we may be living through one of those turning points that future generations will look back on and say, that's when humanity decided what it was going to become.
Oh, that's a pretty heavy, good remark there, Richard.
Well, this is one of those times.
Yeah.
Richard, it's possible we're at one of those times when there won't be another generation to look back and make any questions.
Well, that's
We'll
another
see.
topic, Jim.
That's your usual optimism, James.
What's that?
Your usual optimism coming
No,
through.
realism.
Real,
Okay.
I'm going to end with a story that I read. There was a question asked for the 4.5 AI chat and Musk Grok. Based on the law, should Trump be impeached? And Grok said yes. Chat said no, based on based on the current laws that they couldn't prove beyond a reasonable doubt. So what happened was a dialogue between Chat and Grok, each saying, "Why are you saying that? You're wrong."
Well,
And
Chat's wrong because the reasonable doubt standard does not apply to the impeachment process. Quite the contrary.
yeah, so back and forth they went, and they never did agree. Grok always said that he should be impeached. Congress should do their duty. Chat said there's not enough legal basis to do that, and they ended up in a stalemate. I found that very interesting. That whole dialogue between the two.
Mhm.
Fascinating.
I found,
Fascinating.
I find
The other
Chat-
thing, the other thing that I would like to end with and ask is that the next topic for next month, I'm thinking about CRISPR. There's been a lot of things happening with CRISPR and what it can do now with embryos and with living people. And I'm concerned personally about the unintended consequences and the ethics and values that come from those unintended consequences. Is this something you guys are interested in and would like to explore?
Absolutely.
I think so.
Hmm.
Okay.
And you're right about lots of developments because there are very new generations of this equipment now too.
Yes, yes.
Richard sent out a lot of really interesting links, and there's more to explore. So, Bob, looking forward to it.
definitely.
Okay, great.
Thanks,
Yes,
Bob, for all the work you put into
Yeah,
making
definitely,
that's
Bob.
right.
Thank you so much.